over the past year or so. I think for and some very obvious reasons, right? Which is basically that blockchains are becoming something that's a really big deal, and lots of people are starting to build applications more. In Ethereum, we've had the EFT 4844 this month, and so since then we've had the actually affordable transaction fees like under 1 cent. That's making it even easier for people to build more applications. There's been all this progress in layer 2s, and then at the same time in the AI space, we've just seen this massive boom in what you can do with AI, where I think it's gone from being something that people barely really paid attention to back in 2021 to this extremely big deal that I know a lot of us use every day in our lives in 2024. And but at the same time, I think it's important to really be rigorous in understanding what the actual intersection between these two things is, right? Because at the same time, it's not true that if you just take two random areas that are really cool and fit them together, that there's going to be much of an intersection to talk about, right? It's rockets are cool and crypto is cool, and maybe we can talk about cryptocurrencies and chains and layer 2s running on Mars, but otherwise the two areas feel kind of separate. And so to me the big question is basically figuring out, is this that kind of situation, or is there really something there in the intersection? So I wrote this post on crypto and AI back in January, and back in January, I talked about this. One of the first things that I pointed to, right, is that there was this Venn diagram in my post, right? So basically, in the Venn diagram, on the left side, you have AI, and then on the right side, you have blockchains, and basically the idea is that there's a lot of things that are different between the two, right? So AI is basically high on functionality, but it's centralized, not transparent, and so on. And so, and then of course the flip side of this, right, is that if you look at blockchains, then blockchains are decentralized, transparent, open, but the flip side of this is basically that their functionality is limited. And what do I mean by limited? Obviously you can do really cool things on blockchains, but when we get excited about NFTs, NFTs are just numbers in a database. We've been able to make numbers in a database go up and down since the 1980s, right? And so to me the question is basically what actually is in the middle here, right? Because there's this pretty good arguments to be made that these two things are opposites of each other, right? One of them is sort of the ultimate technology of centralization. One of them is maybe the ultimate technology of decentralization. But the question is well, can you actually use one to try to compensate for the weaknesses of the other, right? And so in this post, I talked about 4 major categories for what the kinds of intersections that I thought that crypto and AI could have, right? So the 4 that I mentioned were basically, one is AI, what I call AI as a player in the game. Then there's AI as the interface to the game. There is AI as the rules of the game, and there's what I call AI as the objective of the game, right? Basically, in this case, what I mean by the game is some kind of system of rules, incentives that is implemented by a blockchain, right? And so if you create a token, you are creating a game. If you're creating a smart contract system, you're creating a game. If you're creating a DeFi protocol, you're creating a game. If you're even doing something like Bitcoin project funding, that's a game. And the arguments that I make in this idea of AI being a player in the game, right, is basically that the decentralization is supposed to describe the game. It's supposed to describe what happens at the center. It's not supposed to describe what happens at the edges, right? And so the way that you combine together the benefits of decentralization with the performance benefits of some more centralized AI approaches is you basically make these centralized AI approaches be players in the game, right? So what does this mean? So the blockchain sets up some set of economic rules for participants to interact, and then AIs just interact in those rules. So this is actually a category that's existed for at least a decade, right? Like we've had on-chain decentralized exchanges for about a decade, and on-chain decentralized exchanges, like I think they are the first crypto AI intersection use case, and we kind of don't think about them, but they've just been passively making markets more efficient the whole time. So this is one example. Another example is AI is participating in prediction markets, right? So this one I think is fascinating. Basically, so we've seen prediction markets becoming more popular recently, right? So we see poly market, we've been continuing to see some of the others, and Omen is continuing to make progress, Augur is still around, right? And one of the challenges is that if you want to get a decent level of quality on an answer to some question, you need to have a pretty high level of volume. And the reason is you need to have a pretty high level of volume in order to get human beings interested in doing the work of figuring out how to actually answer this question. What if we can have micro prediction markets? Prediction markets where the amount at scale in each one is maybe $50 or maybe even $1 or potentially 5 cents. And the use case of this is, I think at the medium level, you basically have this kind of oracle where you can go and ask the questions and you can get answers. And then at the small level, I think there's a lot of really interesting applications in decentralized social media. And one example of an application, just to give people something concrete, is so on Twitter, right, there's this thing called community notes. And community notes does a very good job of basically putting notes on posts that provide various forms of context. Often it's basically saying if the content of this post is actually totally fake and here's the real information. Sometimes it's more nuanced than that. Sometimes it's actually saying, well, the post is completely correct, but here's even more information about it. And so, I think a lot of people from across the political spectrum have had a very high opinion of community notes. But when people criticize it, the biggest criticism is always that notes don't appear fast enough. And one way to think about prediction markets as a building block is that they can make other mechanisms faster. They can make it's basically like the equivalent of distilling an AI, right? Basically, you take some existing mechanism and then you make some much faster thing that gets incentivized to do an as good job as possible of predicting the slower thing, right? And so on Twitter, right? Imagine you want to make a post, and let's say the post is going to be Vitalik endorses unicorn magic dog coin, and let's say someone tweets this, and people start retweeting this, right? And then if you just have community notes, then what's going to happen is basically you guys have seen this, right? Basically after some amount of time, so you're going to see a note, and the note just says actually Vitalik doesn't, and community notes are required to have links, and so they'll have links to some example.com / blah blah, something that I said, and that basically says that I haven't actually endorsed anything, or that I don't endorse stupid coins in general. But the problem is, right, that this happens after some delay, right? This happens maybe, let's say, I don't know, could be 12 hours, could be 24 hours, whatever the delay is, but the delay is too much, right? And so the question is like, well, here's what you can do. You can basically create a prediction market, and the goal of that prediction market would basically be that, like, you could ask a question of like, will there be a note saying that this post is misleading, just to keep things simple, right? And that note is something that and then people can start betting on the prediction market, right? And the prediction market here can have like a very small size. Like it could literally be 0.1. When it's 0.1, there's no point whatsoever in human beings participating in this, right? This is basically just LLMs, bots, AIs, algorithms that are fighting it off against other ones, right? And then the nice thing about this is that like you actually have a ground truth at the end, right? And the ground truth at the end is you can have a more democratic mechanism that's much slower, that involves a lot of people that making a decision, and then this mechanism will actually might put the note at the end, and then it would then give rewards to people who predicted correctly, right? So over here, basically what we have here is a mechanism that is low cost, but fast, but it's in terms of it's missing incentives, right? Basically because if you just like get LLMs to do things on their own, then there's the question of like, well, are the LLMs going to be biased? What are their motivations? Who's actually trading them? And all these things, right? And then over here, what you have is you have a highly legitimate mechanism that is accurate and robust, but it's expensive and slow. And so what you do is you basically say you're using this thing, like the prediction market, as a predictor for the community nodes, and that way, like you actually get signals, basically saying, no, instead of this being in 24 hours, you might have a note over here saying prediction markets show 93% chance is misleading, and so you actually get like something that is both democratic and fast at the same time. So this is like just one example of prediction markets as a player in a game. So this is one section, right? Now let's talk about some other sections. AI as an interface to the game. So this is also a really important category, right? Here, basically, the idea is that one thing that already exists is that crypto wallets have all kinds of features in them that show them that a page that a user is about to visit could be a scam, could be misleading, could be something else, right? And like scams and fraud in general are starting to be increasingly a really big problem, and AI is unfortunately going to keep making the problem worse, and scammers are really sophisticated. So I actually wrote a post about a couple months after this where I talked about the need for people to start understanding and using security questions everywhere. But what if AI can also help you here, right? And the way that AI would help is basically you could have models that are running client-side, so fully on the side of the client, not sending any information off to any centralized server, purely acting to protect you. And these models would analyze all the messages that are coming in, and they would give you a warning if they see something that's potentially misleading. Right? And this is something that I think makes sense for like text messaging. It's something that makes sense for social media. I think it's something that also makes sense for crypto wallets, right? So this would be wallets incorporating features. Right now, there isn't really any use of AI. Right now, it's just like very simple like blacklists and whitelists. But other potentially AI could make this much more powerful. So AI is the interface to the game. Now, AI as the rules of the game. This is like something that's a lot more tricky, right? So when we say AI is the rules of the game, what we mean is, like, there's this idea that people get excited about sometimes of like, let's have AI judges because AI judges are going to be less biased, for example, right? And like that's, and I see the promise, but also that's risky because we know that like actually AI models definitely have biases. Their biases come from their training data, and actually if the training data is opaque, then the biases of the AI are going to be opaque as well. And that's one of the problems. The other problem is that there's this issue called adversarial machine learning. And the issue with adversarial machine learning is basically that, like, you have, like, there are things that people have, like, I'll just give one example directly, right? People have literally created masks, like masks that you can wear on your face, right? Like, combination of, like, COVID mask, maybe like something on your eyes. And if you wear this mask, then at least for like some subset of cameras, those cameras will not recognize you as a person, or potentially they might even misreport you as being a different person, right? So like these kinds of attacks are like actually pretty challenging. And one of the issues is that, well, if you have AI where the pipeline of like how the AI was trained is insecure, then you have like centralized attacks. But on the other hand, if you have AIs where the way that the AI was trained, the data, the entire process was open, then that actually makes it easier to do other kinds of attacks, which is basically attacks where you try to like optimize these kinds of masks locally, and then you run it against your local copy of the AI a billion times, and then you'll take that attack and you'll apply it to the real world, right? And so the question is like, can we create AI models where you get confidence that the training process was fair, but at the same time, like the AI model can sort of contain some kind of private key or some level of data that can be used to like actually fool these kinds of break these kinds of attacks. And so with cryptography, you actually can, right? And WorldCoin has actually been exploring a lot of this stuff really heavily, right? And so like basically you can use multi-party computation, FHE, other kinds of things to try to make like AI training and AI inference actually be like both privacy preserving, either on the model or on the data or on both, and reasonably efficient at the same time. And if you add ZK snark ideas, then you can also make it provable. Now, the fourth piece is AI as the objective of the game. And in that case, what I mean is if we can use some combination of like blockchains and cryptographic tools to make AI safe, then we don't just need to use that for projects like WorldCoin that are themselves crypto projects. We can use that for other kinds of AIs as well, right? And so potentially there's even applications here in just improving the safety and improving the credibility of AIs much more generally. So, and then finally, you can have DAOs that try to do like democratic governance of what goes into the training data and the training process of AI, right? So those are some of the specific intersections that I think are promising. I think the big takeaways are, right, that I think you really want to be rigorous in trying to understand, what actually the intersection of these two things is, right? Basically, if you're building an application that incorporates some level of crypto and some level of AI, then you need to make sure that it actually makes sense. The AI is being used for the things that the AI is being used for, and that you're actually getting guarantees from the crypto part of your application, right? There's a lot of AI applications or crypto AI applications that I've seen that basically just look like, you just publish some data on chain and you like put hashes of trading data. But the question is like, well, is that actually going to be that like secure by itself, right? Like what's the actual security property that doing that gives you? And so I think if you want to build an application that incorporates some combinations of both, then like it's really important to have like a really clear and a really technically strong story about how those two pieces actually fit together. And I think if they do, then like I think there's a lot of opportunity to do some really powerful and amazing things.